The Zauric Dominion was an empire forged through centuries of conquest, a race of hunters who viewed the galaxy as their playground. For them, the concept of prey was simple: any species weaker, slower, or less cunning than their own. In this vast universe, every species had a defined role. Some were predators, others prey. And now their scouts had found a new species, humans. From the distant world known as Earth, the first reports came in, cold and clinical. Earth was inhabited by a creature the scouts described as primitive. Their bodies were frail compared to most of the Dominion's conquests, their technology crude. Their war machines were nothing but relics of past centuries. The scouts noted that humans lacked natural armor, fangs, or claws. They survived through numbers, utilizing tools and machines to compensate for their physical limitations. They appeared to live in chaos, constantly in conflict with one another. The Zauric considered this an invitation to hunt. The report suggested that humanity was a simple prey species, an opportunity for the Dominion's finest hunters to showcase their prowess. Their military force was weak, with only rudimentary firearms and mechanical vehicles. Earth would fall in a matter of days. The alien commanders, confident in their superiority, began to prepare for the invasion. Commander Valther, a towering figure of unmatched arrogance, oversaw the invasion plans. He dismissed any doubts from his officers. "They are weak. We will harvest them like all the others." His voice was firm, filled with the certainty of a predator who had faced little challenge in his long reign. To him, humans were no more than animals, fragile creatures who relied on cooperation and weaponry, but lacked the instincts of true predators. The notion of them being anything other than prey was laughable. Renax, a junior scientist on the Zauric fleet, felt a twinge of doubt. She was familiar with the species' strange social structure, the way they seemed to band together in times of crisis, working in teams to achieve the impossible. She had observed patterns in their history, incidents where humans had overcome overwhelming odds. But Renax's warnings were dismissed. "You are too soft, Renax. You don't understand the nature of true predators," Valther had said when she raised her concerns. "The humans are no different than the herds we've hunted before." As the fleet made its way toward Earth, Renax couldn't shake the thought that there was something they had overlooked. She scanned the human records looking for a weakness. The historical accounts told of survivors, humans who, despite lacking the physical strength of other species, had managed to endure in the most hostile environments. Yet each time they were pushed to the brink, humans adapted. She couldn't ignore this. It was a pattern. However, her voice was lost in the noise of the commanding officers. The invasion was set in motion. Earth, soon to be ravaged by the Dominion's finest, would fall in line with every other species they had conquered. The fleet arrived in Earth's atmosphere, cloaked ships descending from the stars to overwhelm the planet with terrifying efficiency. But as the Zauric forces began their assault on the major cities, something unusual happened. The humans didn't panic as expected. They didn't crumble under the weight of an advanced alien force. Instead, they fought back. At first, the attack seemed disorganized. The humans fled as if terrified, retreating into their cities. The Zauric, sure of their power, pursued. But there was something unsettling about the retreat. The humans weren't simply running, they were guiding the Zauric into narrow streets, empty fields, and dense forests. They were leading them. Valther's arrogance started to erode as he saw the Zauric forces fall into disarray. The humans, despite their apparent vulnerability, had a strange way of setting traps. One group of Zauric soldiers was ambushed in a small town by a horde of civilians armed with crude but effective weapons. They managed to incapacitate one of the elite fighters with a homemade EMP device, disabling his advanced armor. Valther received the report in disbelief. "This should not be happening," he muttered to himself. "They should be panicking." He ordered reinforcements to join the fray. Yet, as the battle unfolded, it became clear that the humans weren't retreating, they were baiting the hunters. The Zauric forces, equipped with hyper-advanced technology, found themselves in unfamiliar territory, their high-tech gadgets faltering as humans employed clever guerrilla tactics. In the forests, Zauric soldiers walked straight into traps, triggered by human civilians who understood the land better than any invader ever could. Primitive homemade explosives, triggered by a simple string tied to a tree branch, caused massive damage to an alien squadron. The Zauric could not understand why these so-called prey didn't fall apart under pressure. They didn't run. They fought. And they didn't fight fair. Renax watched in silence, her doubts growing. The humans, she realized, didn't fight in the conventional sense. They weren't trying to win the battle outright, they were manipulating the battlefield itself. They forced the Zauric into situations where their technology and superior strength meant little. Instead of charging headlong into a fight, the humans outthought the invaders at every turn. Still, Walther refused to see it. His pride wouldn't allow it. "Prey cannot outsmart us," he said, his voice a low growl. But even he was beginning to notice the strange pattern emerging on Earth. Renax took it upon herself to dig deeper into human history. She found stories that puzzled her. Humans, throughout their past, had faced insurmountable odds. They had been driven to the brink of extinction on several occasions, only to recover and advance. Their history was full of wars, but not just for survival. Wars fought for dominance, for progress, for resources. It wasn't survival of the fittest, it was survival of the smartest. Humans adapted faster than any species she had encountered. The more Renax analyzed, the more convinced she became, humans weren't prey. They were something else entirely, something far more dangerous. Despite the mounting evidence, Walther was resolute. The Zauric had faced countless species, and each time they had overcome them. This time would be no different. But something inside him, a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach, refused to disappear. Every time they thought they had the humans cornered, they would turn the tables. Walther could no longer ignore it. They weren't just fighting for survival. The humans were playing a long game, one he wasn't sure they could win. As Earth burned and the humans fought back in ways Walther had never expected, the commander began to realize the truth. This wasn't a battle between predator and prey. It was a battle between two apex species, one who had conquered through sheer force, and another that had learned to overcome everything through ingenuity, unity, and sheer willpower. The first moments of realization dawned on Walther. They weren't hunting for sport anymore. They were being hunted. The invasion had begun, and at first, it seemed like the Zauric were right. Humanity appeared to be crumbling under the weight of a superior force. The aliens poured into Earth's cities, their ships blocking out the sky, their soldiers marching into the streets with weapons capable of turning entire neighborhoods into ash. Humans scattered in all directions, fleeing in chaos, their disorganized retreat reinforcing the Zauric belief that they were mere prey. The first hours of the invasion were filled with what seemed like the inevitable defeat of the human race. However, the Zauric quickly realized something was wrong. The humans didn't behave like prey. As they retreated, they didn't scatter randomly. There was a method to their movement, a pattern that was impossible to ignore. The humans weren't fleeing in panic. They were drawing the Zauric into the heart of their cities. It wasn't an escape, it was a strategy. At first, the Zauric dismissed it. "They are disorganized," said one of Walther's commanders. "They're simply scattering in fear." But that didn't explain why every ambush they faced seemed to be carefully planned, why every city had narrow alleys and hidden passageways that allowed the humans to disappear and regroup. They were luring the invaders into situations where their superior technology meant nothing. In the first encounter with the human military, the Zauric forces pushed into a dense urban area. They anticipated a quick victory, but what they found was far from it. The humans didn't immediately engage in open combat. Instead, they used their surroundings to their advantage, retreating deeper into the labyrinth of streets and alleys. The Zauric soldiers began to find themselves isolated, cut off from each other by barricades and ambushed in the dark. One squad of Zauric hunters ventured into an area of the city where the humans had clearly laid a trap. A few dozen humans, armed with little more than makeshift explosives and basic weapons, ambushed the squad. It wasn't a battle, they didn't stand a chance. By the time the Zauric realized they were outgunned, they were already retreating, casualties mounting. The humans' tactical use of their environment was something the Zauric had never encountered in a prey species. Walther, watching from his command ship, couldn't believe his eyes. "This is not possible," he muttered under his breath. "They are organized. They are luring us. But why?" The humans should have been running, scattered like prey animals, but instead they fought with coordinated precision. They understood the terrain in ways the Zauric couldn't fathom. It was as if they had designed the battlefield itself. Renax, the young scientist, finally spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Commander, the humans are not retreating. They are drawing us in, using our assumptions against us. They are creating a war of attrition." Walther looked at her with irritation. "Enough. These are just primitive creatures hiding in their cities. They cannot possibly be outthinking us." But Renax's voice rang in his mind. She was right, they were not panicking. They were playing a game he didn't understand. The Zauric forces pushed deeper into the city, expecting easy victories, but every time they made progress, they encountered more resistance. Every time they thought they had cornered a group of humans, they found that the humans had already disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but traps and confusion. The aliens found themselves isolated, out of communication with each other, their high-tech gear suddenly rendered useless in the face of human adaptability. In the midst of all this, a strange pattern began to emerge. The humans weren't relying on brute force. They didn't have the numbers to engage the Zauric in a full-scale battle. Instead, they used guerrilla tactics, attacking quickly, retreating even faster, and then hitting again from another direction. It was a war of attrition, a slow, deliberate grind designed to exhaust the Zauric forces. They were wearing the invaders down, piece by piece. One particular group of humans caught the Zauric by surprise. A small team of soldiers, armed with basic firearms, managed to sabotage a Zauric supply convoy, stealing advanced weapons and tech that they had only seen briefly in battle. This unexpected success turned the tide. The humans, despite their primitive state, had just captured the tools of their enemy's destruction. The next battle proved to be even more catastrophic for the Zauric. A squad of elite soldiers had been tasked with taking control of a key communications tower in the heart of the city. They marched in confidently, expecting to overpower any resistance. What they didn't expect was for the tower to be rigged with explosives. The humans had set a trap and it was devastating. The explosives obliterated the top of the tower, sending Zauric soldiers plummeting to their deaths. The humans didn't stop there. They followed up with a precise strike against the rest of the invading forces, using the weapons they had taken from the convoy. Renax, who had been analyzing the situation from afar, finally understood the human strategy. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were breaking the Zauric's will to fight. Every victory, no matter how small, was a blow to the invaders' morale. The humans were relentless. They didn't seek glory or a quick victory. They wore down their enemies through clever, strategic tactics that would exhaust even the most powerful forces. Back in the heart of the invasion, Valther grew more frustrated by the day. He had underestimated humanity and now his forces were paying the price. The invasion was supposed to be a simple hunt, but it was quickly turning into something much more dangerous. "This is not how it's supposed to go," Valther growled to his commanders. "The humans should be running. They should be begging for mercy, not outsmarting us." But the truth was undeniable. The humans weren't running, they were organizing. They were calculating. Valther could no longer ignore the truth. The humans weren't prey. They were playing a game he didn't fully understand, one that was becoming increasingly dangerous for his forces. The hunt was no longer about overpowering them, it was about figuring out how to survive against an enemy that was far more cunning than they had ever imagined. As the day wore on, the Zauric commanders continued to report more losses. One by one, their elite soldiers were taken out by carefully planned human ambushes. The humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting the invaders. They understood the principles of war better than the Zauric had ever expected. The more Valther watched, the more he realized that humanity wasn't just a weak species. They weren't soft or helpless. They were calculating, ruthless in their strategy. And, perhaps most importantly, they were predators in their own right, just not in the way the Zauric had assumed. The humans weren't the hunted. They were the hunters. And that realization was just the beginning. As the days passed, the Zauric forces were pushed further back, their initial confidence unraveling with each confrontation. Valther, once certain that the humans were merely prey, began to question everything. The humans' resistance had stopped being an inconvenience. It was becoming a nightmare. Each battle felt like a setback, their advanced technology no match for the humans' adaptability and cunning. Renax, still observing from the shadows, watched as the humans continued to confound the invaders. They weren't just holding their ground, they were forcing the Zauric to fight on their terms. The invaders had expected humans to scatter and break under pressure. But instead, humans were becoming more coordinated, more precise in their actions. They fought like creatures who knew exactly what it took to win, and that terrified Renax. She had seen the humans adapt and she could no longer deny the truth. The moment of clarity came when she stumbled across an ancient human concept, something that she had not fully grasped before: the apex predator. The more Renax researched, the more she understood how humans had evolved. They didn't rely on brute strength or natural advantages. They had learned to dominate through intelligence, resourcefulness, and teamwork. They were creatures capable of analyzing a situation and adapting to it in ways no other species could. They were predators in a form no one had anticipated. But even as Renax realized the truth, Valther was still too proud to accept it. His reports were filled with excuses. "Their weapons are primitive," he wrote in his private log. "Their tactics are erratic. But the human's ability to adapt, to strike when least expected, could not be ignored." They didn't fight like prey, they fought like creatures with a primal understanding of survival. The Zauric started to lose their footing. Their losses mounted and they were forced to reassess their strategy. The elite hunters who had once been feared across the galaxy found themselves trapped in human-made snares. What had been a mission to capture a defenseless species had now turned into a fight for survival. Valther called for reinforcements, but they were slow to arrive. And even as more forces landed on Earth, the humans were ready. The same tactics that had worked in the early stages of the invasion were now amplified. With each passing day, the humans grew bolder. They began to strike at the heart of the Zauric operation, targeting their supply chains, their communications, and their leadership. The first sign that the humans were fully aware of their potential came when they managed to capture one of the Zauric's flagship vessels. In a daring attack, a small group of human soldiers boarded the ship, fought their way through the alien crew and took control. They had no idea how to operate the ship's advanced systems, but they knew enough to wreak havoc. They disabled weapons systems, jammed communications, and sent the alien fleet into disarray. The Zauric forces, so used to having the upper hand, found themselves outmatched on a battlefield they had never considered: the human mind. Renax was in disbelief. "How are they doing this?" she whispered to herself, watching the chaotic reports come in. The humans didn't understand the technology they were using, they couldn't. But that didn't stop them from using it against the invaders. The only explanation was that the humans, through sheer willpower and ingenuity, were learning and adapting at a pace that the Zauric could never hope to match. Valther was growing increasingly desperate. His fleet was in shambles, their soldiers lost in human traps, their technology hacked or repurposed by the very creatures they had come to subjugate. "This cannot be happening," he muttered as another unit of Zauric hunters was wiped out by a series of coordinated human attacks. The realization finally hit. Humans weren't simply fighting for survival. They were hunting just as the Zauric had done to countless species. They understood the principles of battle better than Valther had ever imagined. "They're not just surviving, they're outsmarting us at every turn," Valther admitted, his pride shattered. A particularly harrowing encounter cemented this truth. In a remote desert, a group of Zauric scouts thought they had cornered a human squadron. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. It should have been a slaughter. But when the Zauric moved in to engage, they were hit by a wave of unexpected tactics. The humans had rigged the entire area with traps, simple but effective devices that used the environment itself to their advantage. Rocks were set to roll down at the press of a button. Explosive charges were hidden in the sand. The Zauric found themselves surrounded by an enemy that used the land as a weapon, just as a predator might use its surroundings to stalk its prey. Valther saw the report. "This is not just a fight for survival. This is strategy. This is intelligence," he murmured as if waking from a nightmare. It was no longer just a battle for Earth. The Zauric forces were fighting for their own survival. Their numbers were dwindling. Their confidence was shattered. The humans weren't just defending their home. They were dismantling the invaders piece by piece, wearing them down with relentless precision. The longer the conflict went on, the more it became clear: the Zauric were not the dominant force here. Renax, who had once feared the humans, now marveled at their ingenuity. They were the apex predators, not in the traditional sense, but in a way no one had ever anticipated. "They are predators of a different kind," she thought. "They don't need claws or fangs. They need only their minds." Valther knew he had underestimated them. "The prey has become the hunter," he admitted quietly as his fleet continued to retreat. There was no stopping it now. The Zauric were being outmatched on every front. The human race was proving without a doubt that they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And now they were hunting the hunters. The irony was impossible to ignore. The Zauric, who had conquered species across the galaxy, were now on the verge of being conquered by a species they had deemed weak and inferior. The moment the Zauric realized that humanity had evolved to become the ultimate predator was the moment the tide turned. The invasion wasn't just a battle, it was the beginning of the end for the Zauric. They had come to hunt, but they had become the hunted. The turning point had come and there was no denying it anymore. Valther, once the pinnacle of Zauric pride, found himself leading an army on the defensive. The humans had proven themselves in ways no one had anticipated. They were no longer just resisting the invasion. They were systematically dismantling the Zauric forces with alarming precision. Every move they made was calculated, deliberate, and devastating. What had once been a confident hunt was now a desperate retreat. The humans had exposed a truth that no one had seen coming. They were more than just survivors, they were tacticians, hunters in a new form. Unlike any species the Zauric had encountered, humanity's strength didn't lie in physical prowess or advanced technology. It lay in their ability to outthink their opponents, to adapt and evolve faster than any predator. The alien invaders had underestimated them, thinking they could overpower these creatures as easily as they had done to countless other worlds. They were wrong. Now, as the tide turned, Walther's strategy became clear: survival at all costs. The Zauric had once been the apex species in their part of the galaxy, but that dominance was slipping away. Every day they spent on Earth, they were learning a painful lesson. The humans were relentless, and no matter how advanced their technology was, the humans had learned how to turn it against them. The advanced weapons and ships that had once made the Zauric so formidable were now liabilities in the hands of their enemies. Walther's desperation began to seep into his actions. He called for more reinforcements, but the galaxy was vast and Earth was becoming a lost cause. Every time they pushed forward, the humans adapted, creating new obstacles, new traps, new strategies. The Zauric were fighting a losing battle, and no amount of reinforcements would change the fact that they were outsmarted at every turn. In a final last-ditch attempt to regain control, Walther ordered his remaining forces to deploy a full-scale assault on Earth's major cities. He believed that by overwhelming the humans with sheer numbers, they could still make a stand. But as his forces descended on the planet's capital, they were met with the same guerrilla tactics that had defined the human resistance from the start. Every street, every alley, every rooftop was a battlefield. The Zauric were overwhelmed by the unpredictability of human tactics. What they saw as a simple urban environment turned into a labyrinth, one filled with traps, ambushes, and snipers waiting to pick off any Zauric soldier foolish enough to expose themselves. The humans were no longer just defending their cities, they had turned them into killing grounds. The final blow came when Walther's flagship was hit by a coordinated human strike. A group of elite human soldiers, armed with stolen Zauric technology and utilizing strategies learned from previous encounters, infiltrated the ship and launched a devastating attack. The ship's advanced shields were no match for the humans' ingenuity. As the Zauric scrambled to respond, the humans disabled key systems and triggered a series of chain explosions that crippled the ship. Renax, who had once felt both fear and awe toward the humans, now watched with a mixture of amazement and horror. The humans had succeeded where no one thought it possible. They had not only survived, they had won. The Zauric, an empire that had once stood unchallenged, were now fighting for their very survival. It was the ultimate reversal. The humans had not only repelled the invaders but had turned the tables completely, hunting the hunters in a way that left the Zauric reeling. With their command structure in chaos, the Zauric forces began to fracture. Communications broke down, and the once mighty fleet now found itself fragmented, disoriented, and unable to coordinate. The humans, with their superior understanding of both tactics and technology, exploited the confusion. They captured Zauric ships, stripped them of their technology, and used it to further turn the tide in their favor. The invasion that had once seemed so certain now appeared all but over. Walther's last message to his superiors was a desperate plea for retreat, a surrender to the undeniable truth that the humans had won. We have underestimated them. The prey has turned into the predator. We must withdraw before it is too late. But even as he issued the command, it was clear that the Zauric were no longer in control. The humans had taken the initiative, and there was no stopping them now. In the wake of the Zauric retreat, Renax found herself reflecting on the one thing that had stood out throughout the conflict: the humans' unyielding resilience. They had never surrendered. They had fought with everything they had, using every resource, every tool, and every scrap of intelligence at their disposal. Their ability to adapt, learn, and overcome had transformed them from a species deemed weak and primitive into one that had not only survived but had conquered the invaders. Renax understood now. The Zauric had made a grave mistake. They had assumed that power came only from strength, from sheer might. But the humans had taught her something different. Power, true power, came from adaptability, the ability to learn, grow, and change in the face of adversity. In the end, the humans had become the true apex predators, not through force but through intellect, determination, and the will to survive. Walther's defeat was complete. The Zauric had invaded Earth expecting an easy conquest, only to find that the humans were no ordinary prey. They were hunters, and now they were the ones in control. The invasion had failed, and the humans, once thought to be no more than weak creatures, had proven their place at the top of the food chain. The message was clear to the galaxy: never underestimate humanity. They were no longer the prey. They were the predators, and the hunters had become the hunted. As the last remnants of the Zauric fleet limped away from Earth, humanity stood victorious. The balance of power had shifted forever. The universe would never see humans as prey again. The predators had claimed their place.